Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. In today's podcast, we're lucky to talk to David Spinks, a professional Scrum trainer, and he's going to be talking to us about transparency and when transparency hurts. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But anyway, welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you very much, Dave. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
It's great. The reason why we invited you and scheduled this was because you've recently wrote a blog about transparency that I was fortunate enough to read. The title is "When Transparency Hurts in Toxic Environments," right? So the word toxic and hurt made me instantly read it, which probably says awful things about me. But I was really intrigued by it. So tell me a little bit about why you wrote about transparency, and in particular how it hurting rather than helping.
Yeah, it was an idea for a blog that's kind of been in my head for a while. And you kind of see these sort of posts and comments on things like social media. If you've never been fired as a Scrum Master, you're no good, kind of insinuating that you've kind of got to die on your sword for, to push things like transparency. So it kind of got me thinking. First of all, transparency is a core part of Scrum, right? If the team and the organization is healthy, transparency is brilliant, right? It means that we can make better decisions. It means that our decisions are going to be based on good evidence and data because it's transparent. It means that we can take the right actions. Transparency is a great tool for building trust. So the list goes on. But if we can't just shout about transparency and expect miracles to happen if the culture is not right for it. So I'm thinking that, and I've seen it myself in a lot of environments, people might be punished for making mistakes, even if they're trying to do the right thing, or in other environments, people being micromanaged. Some organizations, there's a lot of politics involved, or the culture is such that people are just kind of out for themselves, really. These reward systems that reward individuals rather than teams that we often see in organizations. So in these sorts of places, full-blown transparency can become a bit of a weapon. So if the environment does have that toxicity to it, if the Scrum values are not really followed, if we push transparency too hard, some people can be burned for being open, for being transparent. So, like I say, when I see this advice out there about Scrum Masters and Agile practitioners, we should die on our sword in the name of full transparency, I feel maybe that's a bit idealistic, and I kind of just wanted to put a sort of counter opinion out there with the blog and to say, hey, we need to be a bit more pragmatic.
I think I've heard many Scrum Masters talk about their desire to, be so supporting of the Scrum values that if an organization can't live up to them, that they will leave, and that, fair play to them if that's what they want. However, ultimately, how many opportunities are we not delivering on, and how many situations are we not helping? Because transparency is a trait of an environment. How transparent can you be in a particular environment? Each environment is very different, and the culture of those environments, what we reward, both literally with bonuses, promotions, and less visibly with power and status. Which of those is important? What we reward is important. So, and I think transparency is something that is incredibly important for Scrum to succeed. However, to get there is a journey, right? And I think that's what you were talking about around how you can be aware of the environment and manage accordingly. Talk a little bit about that. All right, you're in this toxic environment, working in this investment bank where everybody swears at each other, and the they're all wearing big suits. Actually, they don't do that. I was thinking of Wolf of Wall Street there for a minute, which is probably, or Wall Street, the movie with Michael Douglas. That's probably not the world now. They're probably wearing, Lululemon or something. But they're in this, investment bank, high energy, a lot of swearing, a lot of shouting, very what you describe as toxic. You're trying to build a product for them. We know that transparency is crucial to Scrum and the product to be successful. What do, David?
I think just thinking about what you've said there, I was thinking, transparency as a tool. It's. I don't see it just as the goal, right? We're just not being transparent for the sake of it. So, what are we trying to do with transparency? And as I said before, it's about making the right information available, making decision making better. It's about building trust. So you're right. It's part of a cultural thing, right? We can't change the culture overnight. Implementing Scrum is maybe the easy bit. We can, get people up to speed with their Scrum events, what the accountabilities are, etc. That's the easy part. But I think what we're talking about here is changing the culture to enable the right level of transparency that we need, and that takes time. So my advice as a Scrum Master, as a change agent, it's doing these little things over time. It's being the model for transparency in the way that you act as well, and that sort of stuff can start to influence other people. So it's these things to influence rather than sort of waving the Scrum guide around and saying we need to follow these values. It's being that example of transparency. Admitting when you're uncertain or when there's uncertainty in the environment, embracing that. It's also understanding the context as well, right? Where is the team? Where is the organization at? Where are they? Meet them where they are. That's a saying we often say in our realm, I suppose. So it's looking out for those small opportunities, even if it's on a one-to-one basis. Is there an opportunity to give someone the opportunity to speak out or be transparent in a way that they might not have been before? And again, it's building up that trust and safety sort of over time. It's working with the right people, with the right authority, to look at how they behave, how people are rewarded. Are people rewarded for individual heroics? Maybe that's something we should sort of look and point towards and say, hey, the consequence of that is this sort of follow-on behavior. So again, I think as changing agents and Scrum Masters, part of what we need to do is, there's a line that I used in the blog, which was about transparency isn't about shouting the truth, it's about illuminating the way. So it sounds more of a softy approach, but I think it's like I say, holding up a mirror rather than shoving a light in people's face, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is, let's use that investment bank as an example. This is a fictitious bank. We are not going to be sued by any large Wall Street organization. I'm just making this up. But let's use this investment bank. So, in a culture where it is incredibly aggressive, where it's very, very, I want to say a boys, or that kind of bro kind of culture, transparency will look quite different to in a culture at even just down the street at maybe a health insurance company or a hospital or something, where there's a different kind of environment. For instance, at an investment bank, I would encourage us to the transparency through documentation, make it all about the system, not about the individual, becomes an incredibly powerful tool there, because then you're not positioning yourself as weakness. In fact, what you're doing is you're highlighting, and obviously data is important to investment bankers. Whereas maybe at this health insurance company down the road, it is more about allowing people to share things in a facilitated, liberated structures kind of way. I think and I think that's the crucial thing, right? You have to look at the environment and respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, context context matters, right? And I've worked as a software developer, and there's a certain culture of teams in that place. In e-commerce versus, like you say, working in a team in finance. Even though it's the same industry, even you still get very different cultures across different companies. And again, I think that's something that we should all be learning as Scrum Masters, change agents. It's recognizing that a lot of organizations, a lot of teams are different culturally, and something that worked with one team might not work with another. Some teams might need you to go in and be, what's the word I'm looking for? Dictatorial. I don't want to
a little more
use that in the wrong
abrasive,
context.
a little bit more loud, a little bit
Yeah,
more.
a bit more confrontational.
Have you seen this? A little bit more confrontational. Yeah.
And sometimes teams do need that, right? But some teams you could maybe just not get the reaction that you're looking for. But you could have seen, you could have experienced that working with one team, but then you go into another team, that health insurance, that that e-commerce team, whatever it is, and you might push them over an edge. And again, you've broken that trust. So yeah, taking that little bit of investment, that bit of time, just to understand the context. And I remember reading Ken's first book. He kept talking about Scrum being the art of the possible.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't understand the context, how can you even start to figure out what's possible? Where am I overstepping? Where am I going too far, too fast?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The art of the possible is only possible because of the people and the environment and the culture around it, and the situation is everything. And I think that is super important. We often apply, particularly as a Scrum Master, there is a desire to apply the playbook that you're interested in and you've learned, but actually, and one that maybe errs to your strengths, when actually you need to apply the playbook that your audience needs in the situation. And experimentation is crucial, right, David? I mean, ultimately trying things and understanding the impact of those things.
Right. I mean, we talk about inspection and adaptation in Scrum all the time, right? Our other two pillars, and that should apply to our own approaches, right? We come in, we're taking some approach, we've maybe taken on that more confrontational approach, and we've not got the reaction that we're looking, right? We've got the feedback that actually this has not been effective. We need to adapt our approach. Think of something else, try something else.
And this is where it's turtles all the way down, right? How transparent should you be about your transparency? So, I mean, that's an interesting question unto itself, because there's been situations where I've been very upfront. And by the way, I'd like to officially say I am not a Scrum Master, should never be a Scrum Master. Don't allow me to be a Scrum Master. I do not have those aspirations or skills. I'm your product person. I love product ownership, but there are situations where I'm very explicit about my plan and why I'm approaching things in a way like this. And there's other situations where that actually would be counterproductive, and I tend to look like I'm making it up as I go along. And by the way, sometimes that is totally the case. But do you agree that, because I mean, you say walk the values, but sometimes that can be challenging onto itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we talk about organizations going full transparency, I think at the very least, it could just be overwhelming for people, right? It's like, there's too much information, there's too much going on. Oh my God, what about this? And again, people that might not fully embraced the complex world that we live in and the uncertainty, that could actually be demotivating and scary for some people, in a way. So yeah, I completely buy into that as well. But yeah, full transparent. I mean, I know I've heard stories of some companies where they're saying, yeah, full transparency, let's make everybody's salary transparent to everybody in the organization, right? And okay, fine. If that works for you, okay, but I suspect in most organizations that was going to create more problems. So it's not transparency for the sake of it, right? It's like, why are you enabling that transparency? How is it helping for building trust? How is it helping for better decision making?
It's funny, the salary thing, we talked about that at Scrum.org, and the biggest reason why we didn't do it at STO, because we're willing to experiment with crazy ass ideas here. It was because context is everything. And it's really hard to share all the context, the market rate, the experience, the loyalty, all of that, because those things are very nuanced and require high bandwidth communication, which isn't possible to broadcast. And I know that sounds like an excuse, and we have members of our community that wouldn't agree with that. However, the reality is the context is everything in the example, and that's true about other things as well. There's nuances, and some of them nobody can know everything. And one of the biggest challenges I have with the word transparency is, where is that boundary? When does it become privacy, for instance? When is it private? For instance, a great example, you're working in a team, somebody has a very personal problem that has affected their performance. You're in a retro situation, and that person doesn't want to share the fact that his son or daughter had a drug overdose, or is, something that was very private. However, it did affect the outcome of the increment. We undermined our ability to deliver the increment because that person wasn't available, or when they were very fairly thinking about other things. As a leader, that was communicated to me, but I can't tell the team. That's an example of what the heck do you do in those situations.
Yeah. And that's, even if you've got the best culture in the world, right, where people are collaborative and they are, working well, and they have got that sort of right culture in place, there's still a line there, right? There's that personal boundary, and and again, I think transparency is going to be very personal to individuals as well, right? Where I'm a relatively introverted person. There's things that I don't particularly like, wouldn't want to be transparent about. There's a separation for me between the teams that I work with and my personal life. So yeah, I think there's these personal values come into it as well, and these personal boundaries.
Yeah, and the word professional is an interesting one in that context, because when I started work in '92, gosh, I feel ridiculously old now, and there was a separation of work and home was very, very important. But over time that's become less important, maybe, but there are certain things where it's still incredibly important. And I think an environment can be just as toxic, and you use the word toxic, when we force people that aren't comfortable in that to be like, because that's the norm, like, oh, what did you do at the weekend? Who are
Yeah.
you? What's your partner's name? Where does it, et cetera, et cetera. And it, you understanding how to create a team that's high performing, that's delivering incredibly well, that's being appropriately transparent when necessary. That is the skill of the scrum master, right? Or the delivery lead, or whoever's leading that team. And it's hard.
Yeah, you made me think of someone that I know, and they have this team meeting that they have on a Monday morning. And it's the pretense of something that looks like a daily scrum, but effectively it's the what did you do at the weekend meeting, and it's like for team bonding and team collaboration, and it goes on for like half an hour on a Monday morning. And even though on the surface it looks like it's creating great team morale and team working, person I'm talking to, they dread it. It's like I just want to get on with my work. I don't want to. Yeah, at the weekend, I just sat and watched TV for the whole weekend because I just felt
And you're going
like
to
it,
be
right?
judged, right?
And then I'm going to be judged. Yeah,
You're going
it's
to be
like,
judged. Oh, I went off and did a triathlon and, pickled
yeah,
400 herrings and yeah, and you always feel like you're being judged. And it's funny because in some environments you'd think that was a really great thing. And it's like the jokey culture, when you
yeah,
take it apart, there's always somebody that doesn't particularly like it. And that's the reason why at Scrum.org we try to follow the golden rule. It was actually the platinum rule, not the golden rule. We do unto others as they want to be done onto, not how we want to be done onto. So we try to be empathic. We try to, I mean, whether we always succeed, David, because I can be a bit of a bundle bush. I tend to, oh, what about this? And oh, let's get, and I get overly excited. So I think that there's an opportunity. The other thing that you said, and I sort of want to bring it back. It takes time. And I think that's something that we don't kind of understand. Humans are actually quite slow to change.
hmm
And unless there's some sort of major crisis, like there's a fire or something. But in general, behaviors, particularly these ingrained, often culturally and behaviorally, defined, these behaviors that are defined by the culture that they come from, their, some of the experience of the human being, that they take time to change, right?
yeah. And I think it's even bigger than that because it's not just the psychology of an individual; it's the sociology of a group, right?
Yes.
It's that group. So again, we talk about Scrum Master as a coach, agile coach, but that's not just coaching people individually one to one on one. It's you can then scale it up to the team and then the organization as a whole. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard to change culture, because it's not just individuals, it's that whole sort of herd mentality, if you like. And yeah, that takes time and it takes leadership bandwidth, I believe, because it's about messaging, it's about that consistency, it's how you look at the reward system. You can't do it overnight with a cultural workshop or putting up some posters on the wall, right? It's something that has to sort of become ingrained into the organization. And the more the environment is a difficult one, the more toxic it is, the harder it is, because trust has been broken, because people are reluctant. They've been burnt in the past. Why would I speak out again? I just want to keep my head down and get get through the day,
Get
right?
through the day. Yeah. I'm
Um,
here. I'm here to work, not for anything else.
yeah,
That kind of situation. So, all right. So, as we come to the end of this podcast, and we try to keep these relatively short, and we could talk for days about this. I've got a filing cabinet of examples of when I've done completely the wrong thing and created the opposite of what I was trying to achieve. I have to say, from after reading your blog and having this conversation and previous conversations, sometimes I do worry that it makes it look so hard being a scrum master or being any kind of manager or leader in an organization looks, because you're dealing with people and people are complex, and how they show up and what they bring to the table and is influenced by all sorts of a million variables that you have no visibility, or dare I say, that use the word transparency of, and even if you did, you wouldn't understand them because people behave odd, right? So what if it looks so hard, this stuff? What would you tell somebody? I mean, they're doing the job. What are the couple of things they should take away and start working with?
again, I'm gonna quote Ken again, right? It's about the art of the possible. Starting small, take that time to understand the context. If you're new to a team and organization, and it's about picking the battles. We've been talking about transparency. It doesn't mean everything has to be made transparent now, right? So it's about waiting for the right moment. And you kind of start to know when they come along, there's an opportunity to protect or support that team member, make it safe for that one person to speak honestly. So building these little pockets of safety, celebrating the right, when people are curious, celebrating the right behaviors, asking questions instead of like demanding answers all the time. Um, and I think as well, it's finding those supporters and building those alliances. I'm sure that investment bank that we talked about, right? Even though there's people sort of going along with the culture inside, they might feel this isn't right for me. This isn't how I want things to be. So it's finding those little alliances and help guiding people and building up those sort of coalitions. And Jason Little talks about this in his lean change management stuff. Like if you get to a certain threshold, you start to build momentum. So yeah, it's a we talk about this in liberating structures, right? The 15% solution, right? What's the first steps we can take? And yeah, like I say, being that model of good transparency, right? Being open about your uncertainties, being open when you don't know something. And yeah, last thing I would say is recognizing as a Scrum Master, you're not alone. There's so many people that I see on my training courses that are in similar situations. What do I do? What do I do? That I can't change things. You're not going mad. You're not alone. The final thing I would say is, keep to your own values and, keep your humanity in the process.
Yeah, I think that's good words. And wrapping all of that is be mindful of the culture that and the environment and what transparency means. And one size does not fit all. And I think that you have to evolve a system and a solution that is exactly the art of the possible, I think is the phrase that you use, David, which is really good. And I've forgotten that I read that 20 something years ago, and I every 5 years or so I reuse that phrase, the art of the possible, because that's ultimately the heart of Scrum, whether it's about how your team functions or the product that you're delivering. And amazing things are possible. Hey, thank you for taking the time today, David. I really, really do appreciate it. I always, I always feel a little bit more wiser after spending some time with you. Lot to learn from you, that's for sure. So thank you for taking the time and talking about a little bit of a tricky topic.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's not easy, but hopefully some people have taken some inspiration. And I wish you luck with the dog as well. I know what you feel. I know how you feel. Mine's similar.
Yeah, I have lost that battle. He is incredibly cute and gets away with anything. And in our house we only have one product owner. It is not me. Turns out I'm not even not even a stakeholder often in our Scrum team. But I am a developer. That's for sure. So thank you, David. And thank you for listening to today's Scrum.org community podcast. I was joined today by David Spinks, PST extraordinaire, talking about that very tricky topic of transparency, toxic cultures, and how far can you go as a Scrum Master? How far should you go? Should you resign when people won't do it exactly the way that you have written about? And I think the answer is that's just giving up. Obviously, stay true to your values, but I think there's always a way. The art of the possible, as Ken Schwabel would say. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thank you, everybody, and Scrum on.